Chapter 1. The day I realized I was just the ATM. I was a senior executive who trusted numbers more than people, until one night I received an email saying a $385,000 loan had been filed under my name, co-signed by my own brother. I did not scream, I did not confront anyone, I did not ask my family why. I did something far worse. I let the law speak for me. This is Eleanor's story, and you're listening with me tonight. The morning started like any other late summer weekday in 2023, the kind that feels deceptively calm before you realize it is about to rearrange your entire sense of where you belong. I was standing in my kitchen in Columbus, Ohio, barefoot on the cool tile, coffee brewing while my laptop bag leaned against the counter, already packed for another long day. The sky outside was pale and cloudless, and for a few seconds, I allowed myself to enjoy the quiet before the noise of meetings and deadlines took over. I had built my life around mornings like this, predictable, controlled. I worked as a senior operations director for a regional financial services firm, a job that rewarded planning and punished hesitation. I was good at it. People trusted me with decisions that involved money, risk, and accountability. I knew how to stay calm when numbers stopped making sense. I knew how to fix problems without raising my voice. That skill set had not come from nowhere. It had been trained into me over decades. My phone vibrated on the counter just as I poured the coffee. I glanced at the screen, expecting an email from work or a calendar reminder. Instead, I saw my brother Caleb's name. That alone made my shoulders tense, though I did not fully register it yet. The message was short, no greeting, no context. It said I did not need to come to the family barbecue this weekend. It said people felt uncomfortable when I was around. I stood there staring at the screen, coffee growing cold in my hand, waiting for the follow-up that would explain what this was about. Maybe a misunderstanding, maybe a poorly worded joke. Maybe he meant something else. A second message came through a few seconds later, even shorter. Everyone already agreed. That was it. No explanation, no invitation to talk it through. Just a decision that had been made somewhere without me, delivered like a notice slipped under a door. I did not reply. I did not type anything and erase it the way I usually did. I did not ask what I had done wrong. I did not ask who everyone was. I did not ask why. I set the phone down on the counter and stood very still. What surprised me most was not anger or shock, but recognition. This feeling was familiar. It slid into place like something I had carried my entire life and only now noticed the weight of. Being quietly excluded was not new. I had been living with versions of this moment since I was a child. Growing up, I was the reliable one, the kid who did well in school without needing reminders, the one teachers praised for being mature, the one who never caused trouble and therefore never needed attention. My parents loved me, I know they did, but they did not worry about me. Worry was reserved for Caleb. Caleb always needed something: extra help, extra time, extra patience. When he struggled in school, the family rallied. When he made mistakes, they explained them away. Boys will be boys. He is trying his best. He just needs support. I learned early that being low maintenance made you invisible, so I kept being low maintenance. I learned how to solve my own problems quietly. I learned how to make myself useful. By the time I was in my late 20s, usefulness had turned into expectation. When my parents ran up credit card debt they could not manage, I helped consolidate it. When Caleb wanted to buy a house he could not quite qualify for, I co-signed. When there were short months or unexpected expenses, I wired money without being asked twice, sometimes without being asked at all. No one ever said thank you in a way that suggested it was optional. It was framed as family responsibility. This is what you do when you are the one who can. Over the last 12 to 15 years, that pattern hardened into something that felt permanent. I was not consulted. I was informed. I was not included in decisions, only in solutions. If there was tension in the family, it was never traced back to the dependence itself. It was traced to my tone, my boundaries, my discomfort. So when Caleb told me people were uncomfortable with me at a casual weekend barbecue, something in me finally clicked into focus. I replayed recent conversations in my head. Had I said something wrong? Had I looked tired? Had I failed to smile at the right moment? Then another thought followed, quieter but heavier. Maybe my presence made people uncomfortable because it reminded them of who was paying for what. I carried my coffee to the table and sat down, still not replying. My work calendar chimed softly on my laptop, reminding me of a meeting I needed to join in 20 minutes. Life was continuing as usual, only my place in it had shifted. On the drive to work, the radio played softly, but I barely heard it. My mind kept circling the same memory, not of the text itself, but of all the times I had tried to earn my place by being agreeable, by being helpful, by not taking up space. At a stoplight, I checked my phone again. No new messages, no explanation, just silence where a conversation should have been. By the time I reached my office, I realized something else. I felt strangely calm, not relieved, not resigned, just calm. The kind of calm that comes when you stop bracing for impact and let the truth land. I went through my meetings that day like nothing had happened. I discussed budgets, I reviewed projections, I made decisions that affected dozens of people. Everyone treated me with respect. Everyone listened when I spoke. It was a sharp contrast to the way my family had dismissed me with 2 lines of text. Late in the afternoon, as I packed up to leave, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was my mother. I watched it ring until it stopped. No voicemail followed. At home that evening, I set my bag down and stood in the quiet living room, the same quiet I had woken up to that morning, only now it felt different, heavier, more honest. I thought about replying to Caleb then, asking him to explain, telling him he had hurt me, defending myself, listing everything I had done every time I had stepped in without being asked. Instead, I did something I had never done before. I did nothing. I left the message unanswered. I let the silence sit where my explanation usually went. For the first time, I did not scramble to fix the discomfort someone else felt around me. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling and replayed his words one last time. You make people uncomfortable. Everyone already agreed. For years, I had believed that if I just tried harder, if I just stayed useful enough, I would earn my place. But as the house settled around me and the day finally came to an end, a different thought took hold. Maybe the problem wasn't that I was doing something wrong. Maybe the problem was that I had been playing a role they needed me to play, and the moment I stopped fitting neatly into it, I became inconvenient. I turned onto my side, phone face down on the nightstand, waiting for unanswered messages in the dark. And for the first time in my life, I did not ask myself what I had done wrong. Chapter 2. They didn't ask for money. They took it. A few days later, the quiet I had created by not responding settled into something heavier, something watchful. I moved through my routines with the same discipline I always had: work during the day, home in the evening, meals eaten standing up in the kitchen when I was too tired to sit. By Thursday night, I was alone in the townhouse I owned on the east side of Columbus, the one I had bought years earlier because it felt safer to put my name on something solid. The house was silent except for the low hum of the refrigerator. I had just finished rinsing a plate when my phone vibrated on the counter. I expected another missed call from my mother or a work notification that could wait until morning. Instead, it was an email alert from my bank. The subject line was neutral, almost polite, something about unusual activity requiring review. I opened it without urgency, already half convinced it was a system glitch. My accounts were monitored closely because of my position and income. I was used to alerts. Then I saw the number, $385,000. The message said a loan application had been submitted under my name earlier that evening. For a moment, my mind refused to process it. I read the line again, slower this time, waiting for it to change into something more reasonable. It did not. I tapped into the details. The application used my full legal name, my social security number. The address listed was my parents' house. The cosigner was my brother, Caleb. I felt something inside me go still. Not panic, not disbelief, just a cold clarity that spread outward from my chest. I set the phone down and leaned against the counter, staring at the wall across from me. I could hear my own breathing, slow and measured, the way it always became when something serious happened. This was how I sounded in conference rooms when a project went sideways. This was how I sounded when people expected answers. I picked the phone back up and scrolled, checking the timestamps, the lender name, the attached documents. Everything looked clean. Too clean. I called the number listed at the bottom of the email. After a brief automated menu, a familiar voice came on the line, Michael Hart. He had been my private banking manager for years. He said my name gently, the way people do when they know the conversation will not be pleasant. He told me the application had already been flagged and frozen by their fraud monitoring system due to access patterns that did not match my usual activity. He asked me directly if I had submitted a loan request that evening. I told him no. There was a pause on the line, brief but heavy. Then he said they would open a formal review immediately. He said the information used matched my records exactly. He said the cosigner had completed his portion earlier that afternoon. I asked him to say that again. He repeated it. My brother had signed his part of the loan hours before I even knew it existed. I walked into the living room as we spoke, pacing slowly, one hand pressed against my ribs as if to hold myself together. I asked Michael what that meant. He did not hesitate. He said using someone else's social security number without authorization constituted identity theft. He said it was a criminal offense, not a family dispute. He said the bank would require a statement from me. The words hung in the air between us. Criminal. Offense. While he explained the next steps, my mind drifted backward, not to recent arguments, but to a memory from years earlier. I was standing in my parents' dining room, folders spread across the table, helping them refinance their mortgage after a rough year. I had printed copies of my tax returns and identification to speed things along. When we finished, I tucked everything into a manila folder and left it in their filing cabinet, thinking nothing of it. I had trusted them. It never occurred to me that trust could be repurposed. Michael's voice pulled me back. He told me the account would remain frozen. He told me to review my credit reports. He told me to consider filing a fraud affidavit. Then he said something that landed harder than the rest. This is no longer a family matter. After we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table with the lights off, the glow from my phone illuminating my hands. The house felt different now, not unsafe, but exposed, as if something private had been reached into without my permission. I waited for the impulse to call my mother. It did not come. I waited for the instinct to confront my brother, to demand an explanation, to give him the chance to spin whatever story he had prepared. That instinct did not come either. Instead, I opened my laptop and pulled up my credit report. I checked every account line by line, looking for anything else that did not belong. The numbers stared back at me, orderly and intact, for now. I thought about the text message from earlier that week, about being uncomfortable, about everyone agreeing. I thought about how easily my presence had been dismissed and how easily my identity had been used. This was not borrowing. This was not desperation. This was entitlement. I made myself a cup of tea and did not drink it. I sat there until the clock crept past midnight, listening to the quiet and letting the reality settle into place. My family had crossed a line I could not uncross for them. Before going to bed, I sent a single email, not to any of them, but to a local attorney whose name Michael had provided. I kept it brief. I said I needed to discuss a potential case of identity theft involving a family member. I asked for an appointment. When I finally laid down, the phone stayed on the nightstand, face up, silent. I did not reach for it. I did not rehearse explanations or apologies. I let the stillness remain. That night, sleep came slowly, but when it did, it was deep and dreamless, as if my body already understood what my mind was only beginning to accept. Chapter 3. When Setting Boundaries Made Me the Villain. Morning came without drama. No pounding heart, no rush of panic. Just the quiet certainty that the line had already been crossed, and pretending otherwise would not move it back. I was at my desk before 8, laptop open, notes from the night before still fresh in my head. I called the credit bureaus first, one by one, reading from a checklist Michael had emailed. Freeze placed, alerts activated, extra verification added. The process was clinical, almost boring, and I clung to that feeling. Paperwork I understood. Systems I trusted. By 10, I was sitting across from an attorney named Laura Bennett in a glass-walled office downtown. She was 38, sharp-eyed, calm, and she did not soften her words for me. She listened while I laid everything out: the loan application, the use of my social security number, the cosigner, the house. She did not interrupt. When I finished, she folded her hands and said quietly that I had done the right thing by freezing my credit immediately. She said filing a fraud report was necessary. She said eviction would be cleanest since the property was in my name. She said involving family did not change the legal reality. I asked her what people would think. She met my eyes and said what mattered was what the law said. The paperwork took less than an hour. Forms printed, signatures added, copies made. Each page felt like another door closing, not out of spite, but out of necessity. When I left her office, my phone was already buzzing. My mother was first. I let it ring until it went to voicemail, then again and again. Finally, I answered on the 4th call. Her voice broke immediately. She said she did not understand why I was doing this. She said families should not involve lawyers. She said I was being cruel. I told her calmly that my identity had been used without my consent. I told her the bank had flagged it as fraud. She said Caleb would never do that to me on purpose. I said intention did not change outcome. She cried harder then. She said people were talking. She said I was humiliating the family. I did not raise my voice. I did not defend myself. I said I would not discuss it further and ended the call. My father did not call. He sent a text instead. "You are tearing this family apart." I stared at the screen longer than I should have. The phrasing was familiar. The blame was efficient. It landed exactly where it always did. Marissa moved faster than either of them. By that evening, her posts were everywhere, not naming me, not directly accusing, but telling a story that anyone who knew us could decode. A woman with money, a family in need, a heartless decision. Comments piled on. Sympathy, outrage, advice from people who had never met me. A friend from college texted asking if everything was okay. A coworker asked gently if I needed time off. The pressure was different this time. Not private, not contained. It pressed in from the outside. I went to the townhouse that night and walked through the rooms slowly. Everything in it was mine. I had chosen the paint. I had signed the mortgage. I had paid every bill. Yet somehow I was being cast as the intruder. The eviction notice was already scheduled to be served. Legal, clean, impersonal. That was what hurt the most. Not the paperwork, but the way following the rules made me the villain. Late that night, my phone chimed with a voicemail. My mother again. I did not listen to it right away. I set the phone down on the nightstand and lay back, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle. When I finally played the message, her voice was softer, tired. She said she had not raised me this way. She said families should forgive. She said I was strong enough to handle the loss. Strong enough. That phrase had followed me my entire life. I sat up on the bed and replayed the message once more. In it, there was no question about how I felt, no curiosity, just an assumption that my strength was a resource to be used. For a few seconds, the urge came back, the old reflex. Fix this, smooth it over, pull the paperwork, make it easier for everyone else. Then another image surfaced, the loan amount on my screen, the signature next to my name, the text telling me not to come. I deleted the voicemail. I did not call back. I did not post anything online. I did not defend myself. I did not explain. Instead, I turned the phone face down and went to sleep. The next morning, the silence felt louder, but it also felt honest. For the first time, I was not managing anyone else's discomfort. I was letting it exist without absorbing it. By the end of the week, the narrative had settled. I was distant, cold, unreasonable. People said it in different ways, but the meaning was the same. And still, nothing in me wanted to undo what I had done. Because somewhere between the paperwork and the accusations, I understood something clearly. Setting a boundary did not create the conflict, it only revealed it. I sat at my kitchen table one evening, the house quiet around me, and realized I was no longer waiting for permission to protect myself. The fallout was real, the loneliness was real, but so was the relief. I did not know yet what the cost would be. I only knew that for the first time, the choice was mine, and I was not giving it back.
Chapter 4. The pattern they didn't want me to see. What I did not give back began to demand something in return. A few days after the paperwork was filed, my attorney Laura called me mid-afternoon while I was between meetings. Her voice was measured, but there was a shift in it that made me sit down. She said she had been pulling records related to Marissa, not out of curiosity, but to anticipate potential defenses. She said she had found patterns. That word stayed with me. She told me there were 2 prior civil cases tied to Marissa's name, both involving disputed debt. She told me there was a bankruptcy filing from over a decade earlier, long before Marissa married my brother. She told me the structure of the loans looked familiar. Similar amounts, similar timing, different names. I asked her what that meant. She said it meant this was unlikely to be a one-time mistake. After the call, I closed my office door and stared at the city through the window. I thought about all the explanations I had been offered over the years. Stress, bad luck, temporary setbacks. I thought about how easily I had accepted them. That evening, I sat in my car outside my house for nearly 20 minutes before going inside. I kept seeing my brother's name next to mine on the loan application. I kept wondering how long this had been happening and how often it had worked. The next step was not one I took lightly. I asked Laura for the name of Marissa's ex-husband. She hesitated for a moment, then gave it to me. Ethan Brooks, 45, auto mechanic, Dayton, Ohio. I saved the number and did not call right away. When I finally did, it was early evening. I sat at my kitchen table, phone in my hand, heart steady but alert. The line rang 3 times before someone picked up. He answered with a guarded hello. I said my name and told him why I was calling. I did not lead with accusations. I did not tell him what I thought I knew. There was a pause on the other end, then a slow exhale. He said he had been waiting for this call for years. We talked for almost an hour. His voice was tired but not bitter. He told his story without drama, as if he had already told it to himself enough times that it no longer needed embellishment. He said credit cards had appeared in his name that he never applied for. He said there was a car loan he never signed. He said he found out too late, after his credit score collapsed and his lease was terminated. He said he spent 6 months living in his pickup because no landlord would rent to him. I asked him how long it took to recover. He laughed softly. He said he still was not fully back. I asked him if Marissa ever admitted anything. He said no. He said she always framed it as something that happened to them, not something she did. He said by the time he understood what was happening, the damage was already done. When we hung up, I sat in silence, my hands resting flat on the table. The pattern was clear now, too clear to ignore. This was not desperation. This was repetition. 2 days before the eviction date, my brother asked to meet. He said he wanted to talk in person. He said it was important. I agreed. We met at the house in the early evening. The air inside felt tight, as if it already knew what was coming. Marissa was there too, sitting stiffly on the couch, arms crossed. Papers were spread across the dining table, the ones Laura had prepared. No one raised their voice. I placed the documents on the table and slid them toward Caleb. He scanned the first page, then the second, his face drained of color. Marissa shifted beside him, her jaw tightening. He asked what this was. I told him it was her history. I told him it was public record. I told him it matched what had just happened to me. He looked at her then, really looked at her, as if seeing her from a distance for the first time. She said it was different this time. She said people made mistakes when they were young. She said I was overreacting. I said Ethan lived in his truck. The room went quiet. Caleb's voice was low when he finally spoke. He asked me when he knew. I told him the truth. When you used my name. He did not argue. He did not defend her. He just sat there, hands folded, staring at the table. I gathered the papers and stood. I told them the eviction would proceed as scheduled. I told them the bank had everything it needed. I told them this was no longer a conversation. As I walked out, I felt something shift inside me. Not triumph, not relief, but completion. The story I had been given about who I was in this family no longer fit the facts. That night, I drove home with the windows down, the cool air steady against my face. I did not replay the conversation. I did not imagine different endings. For the first time, the truth didn't need my participation to stand on its own.
Chapter 5. 6 months later, the quiet they couldn't stand. 6 months passed without any kind of announcement, which turned out to be exactly how consequences really arrive. Life did not pause after that night. It narrowed. The noise fell away piece by piece until only what mattered remained. I stopped checking my phone every time it buzzed. I stopped bracing myself when I drove past my parents' house. I stopped rehearsing conversations that were never going to happen. The legal process moved forward quietly, the way it usually does. My attorney handled the filings. Documents were reviewed, verified, forwarded. At some point, the case was transferred to the district attorney's office. I did not attend any hearings. I did not ask for updates beyond what was necessary. I learned early that watching every step did not give me more control. It only reopened wounds that were already closing. Caleb moved out of the house within weeks of the eviction notice being served. I did not see him pack. I did not stand in the driveway and watch him leave. I heard about it later through someone else, the way news travels when people stop speaking directly. Marissa disappeared from social media not long after. Her profiles went dark. Her posts stopped. It was as if she had folded herself out of the public record and hoped no one would notice. My parents did not call. At first, the silence felt sharp, like walking into cold water. I kept expecting a message, an apology, a demand, something to fill the space. None came. Weeks turned into months, and the absence became familiar. The most surprising part was how little I missed the chaos. My days settled into a new rhythm. I focused on my work, not because I was avoiding anything, but because I could finally give it my full attention. I slept better. I stopped waking up with a tight chest. I started taking long walks in the evenings, letting my mind wander without circling the same arguments over and over. One afternoon in early spring, an email from my attorney appeared in my inbox. The subject line was brief: Update. I opened it standing in my kitchen, sunlight coming through the window. The message itself was only a few sentences. The charges had been formally accepted. The case would proceed. No details, no timeline, just confirmation. I read it twice, then closed my laptop. There was no rush of satisfaction, no sense of victory, just a quiet acknowledgement that the line my family crossed could not be erased by pretending it had never been there.
That night, I cooked dinner for myself and ate at the table instead of the counter. I lit a candle I had been saving for no particular reason. The house felt settled, not empty. As the weeks went on, I noticed how much energy I had been spending managing other people's needs. Without that constant drain, space opened up. I started saying yes to things I actually wanted and no to things I did not. I joined a small gym near my house. I booked a weekend trip on a whim and did not ask anyone if it was okay. With time, another idea took shape, one that surprised me. I had spent years being the financial safety net for my family. I knew how isolating it felt to be capable but unseen. I also knew how many women stepped away from their careers after disruption and struggled to find their way back. So I set up a small scholarship fund through my company. Nothing flashy, just enough to help a few women re-enter the financial services field through certification programs. I did it quietly. I did not attach my name to it publicly. It felt important that this part of my life belonged to me alone. There was no reconciliation, no dramatic confrontation, no last-minute realization that tied everything up neatly. And that was the point. I learned that closure does not always come from conversation. Sometimes it comes from distance, from allowing people to live with the consequences of their choices without stepping in to soften the impact. I did not hear from Caleb again. I did not hear from Marissa at all. My parents sent a holiday card that year with a generic message and no return address. I placed it in a drawer and moved on. What I gained was not revenge, it was clarity. For years, I believed that being strong meant absorbing whatever was placed on me, that endurance was the same as love. Walking away taught me something different. Strength could also mean refusing to carry what was never mine to begin with. If you are listening to this and you recognize yourself in any part of it, in the pressure to keep the peace, in the fear of being seen as cold for protecting yourself, know this: choosing yourself does not make you the villain, it makes you honest. Sometimes the quiet that follows is not emptiness, it is space. And in that space, you get to decide who you are without the roles other people assigned you. If this story resonated with you, if it reminded you of a boundary you have been afraid to set, or one you are still holding, stay with this channel. There are more stories like this, and sometimes hearing them is the first step towards reclaiming something you thought you had lost.